An uninvited, masked stranger arriving at my dungeon. Suppose I should be asking for your name and business.
If you've dreamt of controlling dungeons and a demonic legion of imps, you might be impressed by the recently released game of Impire. The developers behind Impire are a new branch of Cyanide Studios, known for games such as Blood Bowl and Loki. This new Canadian team goes by the name of Cyanide Montreal, and together with publisher Paradox Interactive are bringing you the latest and greatest in imp management. Impire is said to be a bastard child of Dungeon Keeper and Dawn of War. But the question here, of course, is Impire worth playing?
Hey, Deathslayer, ready to learn the objective of my positively awesome plan?
Impire is all about one demon of unrivaled evil and a habit for complete destruction. Baal Abaddon, Lord of the Bottomless Pit. Sadly, this demon was summoned by a, shall we say, rather incapable demonologist called Oscar Van Fairweather, leaving Baal in a significantly smaller stature. In Empire, you start off small, quite literally, and go through 4 chapters, where you'll go from serving said incompetent demonologist to ruling an empire of your own. The story itself is alright, certainly nothing that will blow you away and isn't really memorable at any point. But the voice acting does the job, paired with an amusing script that isn't shy of making fun of itself, makes plenty of references and generally just doesn't take itself seriously at all, which gives it quite a bit of charm. At the start, and mostly in the middle of missions, you'll have these small dialogue sections that are quite amusing, but one minor deduction are the stiff animations. Not to mention, characters do not move their mouths at all when talking. Throughout it all, you'll of course be building a little dungeon, and the rooms you construct certainly have a lot of atmosphere to it, with a nice focus on little goofy details. You'll be using heroes as training dummies, or serving them beer from kegs that, well, have less than alive imps floating in them. Furthermore, the maps are generally split in 3 sections. Your dungeon, a world map which looks like a nice set of landscapes, and an outside section next to your dungeon, ranging from underground creepy cellars to bright forests. Graphically, Empire looks capable enough, and all in all, Empire has quite a ton of charm to it all. Though the actual story isn't anything special, it'll have plenty of amusing moments, and the attention for detail in the map and room design is very well done.
Eat, sleep, slaughter, eat, sleep, slaughter.
Remember when I said Empire was marketed as a cross between Dungeon Keeper and, say, Dawn of War? Well, in many respects this is true, but let's immediately conclude that Empire is not a one-on-one Dungeon Keeper clone. It strikes a resemblance, certainly, but plays far from the same and should be taken in its own right. So, with that out of the way, the layout in Empire centers around 6 different screens. Of course, there is the main screen, and this will be most familiar to Dungeon Keeper, which is a semi-isometric screen with plenty of control over the camera. Here you'll have a clear view of what exactly is going on, and can also do most of your actions with a radial menu, after right-clicking on an area or a unit, though it is generally far easier to use one of the other screens. Secondly, there's the Management Mode, opened by simply zooming out or clicking the appropriate button. Management Mode is where most of the strategizing will be happening, and from this screen you'll be constructing your buildings. It is also generally where you go to train your units, and it just generally gives you a good quick overview of the entire map. Buildings are where Empire takes a pretty hefty turn in a different direction. Unlike, say, Dungeon Keeper, in Empire your buildings have a predetermined size and layout. Because of this, they are a lot easier to use, as they all have a clear function, and you won't have to fuss over how large you'll be building something for maximum effectiveness. But on the other side, it takes away a lot of freedom in how you will design your dungeon. Not to mention, some rooms will already be present on the map, which you then have to repair. But the main issue here is the fact that you can't delete rooms at all, giving you even less freedom and being a downright pain from time to time. Once you place a room, you can still cancel this up until the point where a worker starts construction. Once the first wall falls, you are completely committed to having the building in whatever awkward spot you placed it in. In addition, removing walls, so say you can construct hallways, can't be cancelled at all. This all creates for quite a lot of frustration and highly limits you in your dungeon layout. Thirdly, there's the world map. This map will allow you to perform out-of-dungeon missions in the form of so-called raids. Raids are carried out by squads of units and will vary from goal, though they are the exact same in execution. Send a squad in that direction and they'll go and beat up what's there with rarely any issues or difficulty. Sometimes used for quests, but also rather important for acquiring resources. It's easy to use, but requires practically no thought behind it. Then there's the squad screen. Here you'll merge your summoned units into squads of 4 and generally manage them in the form of upgrades and the likes. A squad, as I said, consists of 4 units, and it is generally best to combine 4 different units into one squad, as they get a specific skill combo, passive upgrades depending on what exactly you combine in one squad. Another screen is the Index Dungeonis. Here you can spend so-called DEC or DEC points. These points are gained by completing small achievements, for example the ever so lovely kill a certain amount of heroes goal. They are then spent on unlocking new units for one match, or passives and buildings. Essentially, it's a match-specific skill tree, and does allow for some different playstyle choices. Finally, there's the Evolution screen, and here you will level up Baal and mutate him with different passives. One lovely part of this is that every passive is visually represented on Baal, turning him from a rather unimpressive little imp into a huge, imposing overlord. The way this works is that during campaign you get these after set levels and can spend them pre-match. In the Skirmish multiplayer modes, you instead level up Baal mid-match. Overall, it's simple and easy to get into, but sometimes an awfully clunky interface. For instance, recruiting minions would have been a logical function on the squads tab, but isn't present there. So what you have to do now is go to the management mode, or if you want to do it even slower, click on the various rooms. Then train them there, go back to the squad screen and pair them up in groups. From there on you need to individually give them upgrades and the likes, and all of this just makes for an unnecessary slow interface. Furthermore, micromanagement is absolutely key in Empire. In Empire, akin to your more standard real-time strategy game, you have to individually control all your units. Under absolutely no circumstance will minions go about their own business. Say, workers for instance. They won't actually do anything until you tell them to, beyond picking up some items on the floor. And they don't even run away when being attacked, unless, again, you explicitly move them out of the way. And this practically goes for all your units. Squads will automatically attack enemies within range, but that's really about it. Teleport a squad next to a ladder, and they won't actually attack the ladder. They'll stand there staring at the wall until you order them to attack said ladder, or put them on a patrol mode. But in that case, patrol mode has the issue of not showing you what their actual patrol range is. Now, for that matter, ladders are created randomly and are a precursor to a hero invasion. If you do not destroy these ladders, then heroes will be capable of using those and spawn somewhere inside your dungeon. If you do destroy them, they will be forced to use the entrance, where you'll generally have your lovely trap set up, ready to pulverize them. This system is really more tedious than anything else. You'll often have to stop with what you're doing and instead teleport squads to the ladders and then have them attack said ladders. A much better way of doing these things is scattering your excess units across your dungeon and setting them on patrol mode, but it is still far from perfect and really is just more of a bother than anything else. Overall though, Empire has a very specific gameplay, which in its own right is enjoyable enough, but suffers from some odd choices. It is worth mentioning that the tutorial of the game is very clear and doesn't hold back when it comes to explaining how mechanics work. With that in mind, there are 3 game modes in Empire. Playing it solo, you only have the option of doing the campaign, and this is where the focus of the game lies. The campaign is divided, as I mentioned, in 4 chapters, and all of these missions are quite long, easily spanning multiple hours, though this often is more of a drag than anything else, as you are highly limited in what you can do in these missions and you progress very slowly. But there is plenty of content here, and on occasion you can make a few decisions, changing the story outcome to an extent. Secondly, you can do all these missions in co-op, with up to 3 other players. A nice feature initially and works exactly the same as the campaign, but then gives every player an individual dungeon, which, well, sadly other players cannot enter. Instead, you can only interact with one another in the shared outdoors area. Thirdly, there is a Skirmish Mode, and this is multiplayer only as there are no AI enemies. In this mode you fight over control within the outdoors areas. In this mode you can also pick between two factions, the main Fiends faction and the second Soulless faction. They work the same in many respects, but do have some different features and aren't just new skins. But again, here you cannot attack or visit other player dungeons, which is definitely a missed opportunity. The clear main issue here is, however, the fact that multiplayer is nearly impossible to play due to the tendency of Impire to crash. In single player, this is not a big deal as you can easily save, but they decided against letting you do this within multiplayer, and as there is no such thing as a drop-in system, multiplayer and co-op matches aren't worth the risk of abruptly stopping and losing all your progress. Overall, Empire, in its own merits, is a decent game with some clearly flawed decisions. Micromanagement can be tedious, there is far too little freedom in how you build your dungeon, and multiplayer just doesn't function half of the time. Which might be brushed off by a quick beta sign on their part, but this doesn't take away from the fact that the game is just unstable and often crashes. And without any systems in place to continue post-crash in multiplayer, this is just not a functional game mode. But looking at Empire as a purely single-player experience, it does an average job and is overall enjoyable. It has a ton of charm to it, rooms especially, and their attention of detail is spectacular, plus the overall arching story and voice acting is decent. All in all, I'd give Empire a generous 6 out of 10. Worth picking up if you are looking for a fun but flawed single-player campaign, and once they iron out the crashes, making multiplayer functional, I'll gladly give it a 6.5 or 7 as the potential is there. For now though, I've been Haas from Haas Gaming, and here's hoping Empire will be significantly more impressive in the coming weeks.